Is the security of your prepping activity being compromised? Could people be keeping track of what you have and where you keep it? Are there groups of bad actors out there who may be planning to take your preps for themselves when society starts to crumble all around us? Well, the answer is yes to all of the above, okay? So what can we do about that? Well, the answer is it's complex and it's multifaceted, but it all starts with a concept called operational security. All right, stick around for the video and I'll explain what that is. And welcome to the Wasteland. Hey everyone, this is Chris and you are watching Wasteland by Wednesday. On this channel, we discuss the impending collapse of civilization, how you can prepare to survive it, and why you should get to it as soon as possible. This area I'm out in right now is called Dutchman Pass. It's part of the Black Mountain Wilderness south of Las Vegas. And while it may seem like I'm in the middle of nowhere, the truth is that there are suburbs with green lawns and dog parks less than half a mile that way. Exploring areas like this is one of those things I was talking about when it comes to preparing for an emergency bug out from the city, okay, from your city.
When I have talked before about being able to leave my house and be out on the wilderness trails in a matter of minutes, this is what I'm talking about. All right, sure, you could take the highway out of town, but the entire United States is crisscrossed by off-road trails, forestry service roads, power line roads that follow the grid lines from city to city, and even like railway service roads. There are a lot of ways out of your city, but the main ones will be a disaster of traffic jams, accidents, and maybe even blockades in the event of a real SHTF situation. So, knowing these alternate routes along the edge of your own city, that'll be a game changer. Out here in the desert southwest, these borders between the civilized world and the wild one can be a bit more pronounced than usual for sure, and it can present a stark visual. This trail that you see snaking away into the distance here can take you from right on the edges of the Vegas suburbs all the way to the border with Mexico without ever having to get too close to any large town at all. An interesting tidbit to think about, right?
You can literally go from being in a neighborhood, okay, to being on a wilderness trail in just a few minutes, all right? And those trails can be a real lifesaver in situations where all the roads and highways end up clogged with refugee traffic and whatnot, or even getting shut down by some government order or martial law declaration or something like that. Definitely a bad situation, but that's not the topic of our talk today, okay? Today, I want to talk about a key concept for collapse prepping, all right? And really for all prepping in general. That concept is operational security, all right? Or OPSEC for those of you who like acronyms like I do. In short, OPSEC is the process by which you protect critical information that could be otherwise used against you, okay? The focus is on preventing others from having access to information about you that may compromise your operations and safety, okay? Both after collapse and before it. Take a look at some of these thunderclouds, guys. This is why I'm out here today. And this system is moving in pretty quick. Lots of flash floods out here, and today I'm going to be checking out, just personally, exactly how fast it happens and where the flood channels exactly go. But at any rate, back to the lesson at hand. All right, now as an example for myself, some of my regular viewers, you guys may already know that I'm part of a larger group of preppers, all right? Just over a dozen of us that is formed as it's a kind of collective, okay? We're organized around the idea of prepping for the collapse of civilization and helping each other survive the aftermath of it. All right, now normally when people think of such things, they assume that the biggest priority there is something like defense, okay, maybe, or stockpiling supplies and food, or maybe even learning how to live without the benefits of society, right? And it's true, you know, those are definitely big parts of it, and certainly high up on the priority list, but there's only one thing that's right at the very top of the list, and that is operational security, okay? The reason for that is twofold. First, the primary danger that you're going to encounter in a post-collapse world is going to be the potential actions of other people, right? Now, sure, there's some things that are more dangerous, such as wildfires and radioactive fallout, or sickness and disease and all that good stuff, right? But the difference is that those things are all more predictable and easier to plan and prepare for than are the actions of other people, okay? Especially if those other people are organized and trained, put together into a force that, you know, maybe after the resources that you have specifically. Okay, with that being the case, staying off the radar and possibly off the menu of other post-collapse survivor groups is extremely important. All right, it's a good thing to hide from them and be hard to reach, but it's an even better thing to simply be completely unknown to them entirely. The second part about why operational security is our highest prep priority is that, you know, this is an area where we have both the most potential exposure and also the most control over managing it. Okay, by that I mean that right now, with society still functioning, okay, the sheer availability of open source intelligence tools, you know, the sheer availability of all that stuff to the general public is just astounding, right? I mean, think about just Google Earth alone. Each and every person out there now has on their phone satellite imagery capabilities that just over, you know, 30, 40 years ago, those were reserved for nation states, all right? Combine that with social media, online archives and databases of accessible public records, man, you know, that's not even getting into the new AI tools for open source intel, okay? Basically, anyone out there can find out a whole lot about you with very little info to start with. And that's a problem, okay? And all this means that keeping the secrets that will one day keep us alive has to be paramount. It's very, very hard to hide now. And really the best way to do it is a combination of both information security and creative misdirection. Put those two together and you have some core elements of OPSEC. Whew. Wind is really picking up now. Hopefully it's not ruining my audio. But anyway, in the simplest terms, okay, OPSEC just means keeping your activities secret, okay, so that other people can't figure out what it is that you're up to or what goodies you might be hoarding, all right? There's a lot more to it than just keeping secrets, but many conventional preppers have this idea that they're living in the shadows like some sort of black ops ninja, okay? Well, guess what? They're not. I'm not. You're not, okay? In reality, you can't, all right? Not within the confines of society, anyway. You know, this is the modern age, the digital age, whether we like it or not. And for the most part, before you even get a chance to stash a bunch of newly purchased goodies, your neighbors have already seen you almost throw out your back trying to carry it inside, and they're probably wondering why in the hell you need so much damn rice. Yeah, this thing's moving in quick. So hopefully I can complete this video out here today. Anyway, so while it's a good idea to keep as many secrets as you can, don't fool yourself into thinking that you're going to have some secret squirrel stash that absolutely no one will ever know about, okay? That being said, it's not your neighbors that you really have to worry about most, okay? Sure, you know, it's not good for them to have that information just in case you know, they one day join the desperate mobs of survivors out there looking to cook your bacon, okay? But the real dangers are those that are already planning as if your bacon is their own, okay? It's just stored at your house, all right? They already consider it theirs. Now, most people don't really believe this to be true, all right? But this is one of those unconventional things that I have personal experience with, okay? I'm not going to get into a whole lot of unnecessary detail about that here. But I have spent a lot of time in close association with some of the irregular elements of society. And let me say, there's quite a few people out there they're just different, okay? Some of these different people are something like preppers, in that they are, they're aware of the coming collapse and they intend to have a plan for when it happens, all right? Some of them are exactly like preppers, okay? They're just cut from a different cloth than the rest of us. Now, when it comes to them, their prepping plan is a predatory one, all right? Their idea is to keep track of others who have supplies that they can steal, either by stealth or by force. Should the need arise and that threat of law enforcement response and all that's disappeared, and I'm not talking about just like street thugs or meth-addled rednecks or whatever else here, all right? These individuals run the full spectrum, okay? From common criminals, yes, but all the way up to active duty military and law enforcement personnel, all right? I've met them, I've talked with them, and I've gotten to know some of them. They call suburban areas, they call them target-rich environments, okay? And all that stuff you have piled up to ride out the apocalypse, those are referred to on their plans as assets in place, all right? Not your assets, their assets. Think about it for a minute, even just hypothetically. What if there were a few members of, like your local police force who were really into prepping, okay? And they believed, as I do, that a real permanent collapse was imminent, okay? Do you think they'd hesitate to use their current resources and informational access to start planning for that day? Do you think it's too far-fetched for members of law enforcement or the military to be serious predators? It can be nice to say otherwise, but we all know what reality looks like, okay? And there's plenty of media stories out there, stories that come out about police running theft rings and drug smuggling operations and even being involved in human trafficking, okay? You think they would balk at coming to take your supplies or worse? Probably not. Now, in short, listen, there really are individuals and groups that are out there that are gathering intel and coming up with plans, okay? And they're going to be doing their best to try to survive just like everyone else. So each of us, as preppers, needs to make sure that our best is better than the other guy's best, okay? And that means we need to have a plan ready to screw up their plan. Now, I'm very serious here, my friends. You're not the only ones doing research to survive collapse or whatever else, okay? Bad guys do their research too. And when they're doing their research, it's a constant thing. It's happening at school, at the grocery store, even just driving to work, okay? They see and they remember, all right? So the real goal of OPSEC is to keep them from seeing as much as possible. You need to try to be a ghost as much as you can. And that means taking operational security very seriously. Now, proper OPSEC research will challenge you to look at yourself through the eyes of a potential adversary, okay? To identify things that could give away what you have or what you're doing, and then to deny that adversary the information that they need to act against you or your interests. Now, when it comes to that, you can't hide everything. And yes, the more you prep, the less you'll be able to hide. For me and my own group, we've prepped a lot, okay? We do have the advantage of having quite a bit of our operation moved well away from the prying eyes that most people have to deal with within society. And that's probably the most solid aspect of our own OPSEC. But even still, most of us have some presence still within society, all right? And each point of contact with that society is another potential opening for an adversary to get information. Now that's why my group absolutely hates my YouTube channel activities here, okay? And my blog and everything else that I'm doing online to try to help others. It's a hell of a tightrope that I have to walk sometimes, so I have to really stay on my toes as much as possible. My own duties and position within the group are, for the most part, intelligence gathering and informational awareness and all that stuff, okay? So I know a lot about OPSEC from the aspect of somebody on the other side trying to get through it whenever I can, all right? But there's someone else that's in my group that has an opposite duty, okay? Which is basically best summed up as counterintelligence, okay? Basically being in charge of informational security and making sure that none of the rest of us slip up and, give away critical information. Now, needless to say, given my very public activities with YouTube and everything else, this guy's on my ass a lot. Okay, that's why I got to stay on top of my own operational security game. And that's why you've never seen my compound, okay? Nor have you even seen the close vicinity of it, and you never will. You know, I don't film very close to that at all. Even when you see me filming like inside my house, okay, the studio or garage or whatever, there's very little in the background that could give away critical information, all right? Furthermore, there are also little tidbits that we call seeds, okay, that are placed in the backgrounds on purpose. Not for you, but for the more detail-oriented viewer, I should say. These seeds are just little bits of misdirection, either random or purposeful, and that's an important OPSEC practice right there, okay? You know, there's a part of intelligence gathering that's called, it's called data mining. All right, and part of that is looking at people's pictures and videos on social media and even regular broadcasts and such. You're paying more attention to the objects and activities in the background, okay, rather than whatever the focus of the video or photo actually is. You know, you're looking at people's mail on the counter or whatever. You know, when you saw me in my kitchen the other day, you know, someone who was data mining, they would have been paying more attention to like what was stuck on my fridge with magnets and what was laying on the counters rather than whatever the hell I was talking about, okay? And we call this, we call these little bits of information, we call them seeds because they are things that can grow to become other things, okay? An appointment reminder for a doctor visit stuck to the fridge, okay? That can tell someone a lot about where you are. You know, it can tell them about what issues you may have, and potentially it can even give away a time and a place where they can physically find you to begin some sort of in-person surveillance. All right, now, you know, there's an incredible amount of security that can be lost simply by having someone see that one little seed. All right, it's a huge OPSEC vulnerability. Now, at the same time, if that seed was planted there on purpose as a fake, well, now it's an OPSEC asset. All right, it can send an adversary searching down avenues that go nowhere, or even better, it can send them somewhere that you want them to go, okay, without them ever knowing that they've lost the initiative. And that's OPSEC, baby. And yeah, I know, you know, it can sound a bit, it can all sound a bit paranoid, okay, and all that. But as they say, are you actually paranoid if people really are out to get you? That's the question, right? And you know, that's something I want to address more in the future for sure, because it really is a real thing, all right? And there really are a lot of people and other groups that are planning to be exactly like that sort of werewolf prepper ideal, all right? I'm not sure exactly where that term started popping up in regards to those who are prepping to seize the preps of others later, but me and my group use that werewolf term specifically to talk about these folks, okay? Werewolf, as a word, it works well because these are people who do not outwardly appear as what they really are, okay? Not only that, but you would never really see that side of them, okay, except down the road in some very special circumstances, right? Like a full moon, maybe, or the collapse of society, right? They're not running around stealing and robbing right now. All right. In fact, some of them are probably even enforcing the laws and protecting your property while they catalog it for future use. Now, in short, you know, it isn't the criminal types that you need to really be on the lookout for, okay? Those guys who do fit the bill now, well, in truth, most of them aren't really that serious of a threat. All right, easy enough to see coming, you know, not really too informed, and rarely are they trained very well. All right, if you're expecting to have to be on the lookout for someone that looks like they just walked off the set of the Walking Dead TV series, well, that's not it at all, okay? The real dangerous ones are the ones who don't seem like they're bad guys at all, okay? You know, your doctor, your kid's PE teacher, all right? Whatever, you know, the guy that takes care of your parking tickets, maybe even him. With society still functioning around them, with all the laws and consequences that entails, they look and act just like the rest of us. Werewolves indeed. Now, there are signs and red flags and all that, but that's a subject for another video, okay? Right now, we're talking about the the operational security necessary to help avoid such folks ever noticing you in the first place. Okay, and I've definitely digressed off of that topic, as is my habit. Besides, it isn't just the bad guys you have to be thinking about, it's everyone else as well. Okay, true, you definitely want to make sure you stay hidden from the real werewolves out there, but you also don't want to end up being known as, you know, that prepper guy, okay, who might have the skills and supplies when no one else does. Having refugees, you know, show up at your door hoping for food or leadership or anything else, that's not a good thing. All right, you have your own family and your own community group that has to be the priority. Everyone else needs to get hind tit. Now, back to OPSEC, okay? Now, without getting too far into the real nitpicky stuff, the bulk of OPSEC practices they'll simply be common sense stuff, okay? Keeping an eye on the type of things that you put out there on social media for other people to see. Watching what you say about preparedness or even world events to those around you. And in general, just being a real tight ass with your information, okay? There's a lot of individual tips that I could go into. Things like, you know, not dropping your ham radio call sign everywhere, okay? That's linked to a lot of public information. Limiting the paper mail that you receive to your residence. You know, people can steal that. Better to use a P.O. box instead. And it goes on. There's a lot of little stuff. I do have an article on my website that goes into much greater detail, and I'll link it below in the description or pin it in the comments or something. I also talk about it in my collapse prepping book, although the old one that's still for sale right now is getting out of date, so don't go buying it until I launch the updated version later. It can end up being a complex thing as your level of preparation gets more expanded, but you can learn as you go. All right. The priority for OPSEC is to recognize that there are people out there who are looking at the people around them in an adversarial way. And the best way to deal with them is staying off of their radar in the first place. Now, when you start getting more into managing your operational security, don't forget to utilize the tools of misdirection. All right. These can serve you even better when it comes to things you can't always avoid being seen. All right. For example, if you keep taking obvious trips to, to some remote location or maybe a hunting cabin that you have somewhere, you know, it can still be okay to talk to your friends and neighbors about it, but that doesn't mean they really got to know exactly where it is or what you have there. Okay. If you end up telling the wrong person where you're going, you might never get there. All right. Now, conversations about some things like that, those are opportunities to drop little misleading tidbits into the discussion. All right, things that may stick for later in their minds and help you out, such as changing the location of your spot when talking about it. You know, is your spot up in the mountains to the north? Cool. But instead of dropping that potentially compromising little seed, mention instead how it's actually not far from the river over to the west. You know, those guys aren't going there. They don't need to know where it is, but you don't need to be a complete dick to your neighbors either. That makes you stand out as well. When it comes to OPSEC, it really is the little things that can come back to bite you. All right, concealment and misdirection are the tools that you should use to face pointed questions that are no one else's business. All right, so do your research. There is a science to the idea of avoiding notice and being generally less memorable, but make sure you consult good sources out there, okay? Many of which I've got linked in that aforementioned article of mine. There's a lot of gimmicky ideas out there surrounding the whole gray man thing and all that, and not all of those are really useful. So, just keep your common sense hat on, okay? Operational security, it should really be a very big part of your preps, all right? And like I said, it's an area where you can have a huge impact with little to no costs, okay? Securing your future safety starts with locking down your current operations. Check out my article on wastelandbywednesday.com. I maintain that site 100% ad-free, okay, just for you guys, to be a place online where you can find information without getting bombarded by ads for MREs or sausage hardeners or any of that stuff, okay? It's still a work in progress, but, well, I'm working on it, okay? All right, my friends, that's my bit for today. Thanks for watching, and for my subscribers out there, thanks for sticking around. All right, stay safe and stay ready, my friends. It's a wasteland out there.